Mahalo, you fucking science nerds. It's time to talk about what's happening in America's beautiful 50th state, Hawaii. As you may know, Hawaii is made up of a series of volcanoes, which makes it perfect for observing the universe, at least from the vantage point of one of the volcanoes that's not currently spewing hot lava. That's why people are currently attempting to build a brand new telescope on Mauna Kea, the dormant volcano that is the biggest one on the Big Island. It's called the 30-meter telescope, or TMT, so named because of its big-ass reflector that's going to allow astronomers to view the universe at 13 times the resolution of the Hubble. I say they're attempting to build it because currently other people are protesting the telescope and blocking construction vehicles from entering the build site. It's now a whole big thing, so let's dig into what's happening exactly. Note that when I'm talking about this, I use the general word people. People are trying to build, and people are protesting. That's because it's really easy to make the mistake of misidentifying the sides, saying that scientists are trying to build the telescope and Native Hawaiians are protesting the telescope, which isn't fair because there are a lot of scientists protesting, and there are Native Hawaiians who support the TMT, and there are people who are shockingly both scientists and Native Hawaiians, and they have their own feelings about it. If you make that initial mistake, that makes you more likely, and when I say you, I mean if you are a skeptic or a science enthusiast like I am, it makes it more likely that you may easily fall into the trap of saying that one side is about pursuing, the noble pursuit of exploring our universe, and that the other side is some hippy-dippy religious bullshit. One side is about facts, and one side is about feelings. That's wrong and dumb. And to learn why, let's go into the facts, the actual facts. Back in the 1960s, scientists first came to Mauna Kea to see how good it was for observing. And the answer was super fucking good because of a few things. One, it's high elevation at 14,000 feet. Another, it's dry conditions. And 3, it's predictable wind patterns. Oh, and 4, the fourth reason why it's so good is because America owned it in the sense that we invaded a sovereign queendom, set up permanent military bases, created a coup, and then annexed Hawaii against its will, the will of the people, about 60 years prior to this. And we made it an official state a few years prior to this, prior to scientists discovering Mauna Kea. How convenient. So universities and the military started building observatories on the mountain. Yes, Mauna Kea is sacred to Native Hawaiians and is extremely important to the ecosystem, including to the production of fresh, clean water resources, but they wanted observatories there, so they built them without bothering so much with things like permits or environmental impact studies. They built several telescopes and then they gave themselves permits for them a decade or so later. And then they kept building and building. By 1998, the Hawaii State Auditor reported that Mauna Kea had been mismanaged for 30 years at that point, bringing attention to the obvious need for a master plan that would protect the land, that would figure out which telescopes could be decommissioned, and make sure that any new construction was done competently. That didn't happen right away. 2 more telescopes were built before University of Hawaii finally did draft a master plan in the year 2000. That plan would allow for 40 new telescopes, so they decided to go ahead and build 8 more by 2002, bringing the number to 13 operating telescopes. In 2005, NASA was looking to construct the Keck Outrigger telescopes, but they were asked to first do an environmental impact report. That report found that 30 years of astronomical activity had caused, and I quote, significant, substantial, and adverse harm to Mauna Kea. There had been numerous spills of hazardous materials like mercury and solvents. There had been overflowing trash that had to be airlifted off the mountain. The scientists had well and truly fucked that mountain up. NASA after coming out with that report, decided to withdraw funding for that project. There's a lot more in this history that I've skipped over for time. You can read up on it if you'd like, but that's a pretty decent overview of what's been going on up until the point where we come to the TMT. The 30-meter telescope would be the largest telescope built on the mountain, and Hawaiians are being assured that it will be environmentally safe, that it will produce zero waste. They are assured that this will be the last telescope built on pristine land on the mountain, and that any new telescope would have to take over the footprint of a previous telescope. All of that sounds great, but if you were a native Hawaiian living at the foot of that mountain, and you had seen 50 years, more or less, of construction, 50 years of lies, of broken promises, of a complete lack of concern for the environment on the part of the people who stole your people's land and built things without permission, would you believe them? Would you say, oh, I'm sure this time they're telling the truth and it's going to be different? I actually do think that at least the scientists, though not necessarily the funding organizations and the politicians who want this telescope built, have good intentions and plan to hold true to their promises. But even if they are, even if that is true, they're not the sole people in charge of what's going to happen. Accidents happen, changes of government happen, funding changes happen. And looking at the history of this land, can you truly and honestly say that when things go wrong, someone at the top is going to be looking out for Native Hawaiians? I can't say that. So far in this video, I focused mostly on the recent history of Hawaii and the environmental impact of construction, because I know that most people in my audience are atheists and skeptics. But it is worth noting that Mauna Kea is also culturally and spiritually significant to Native Hawaiians. Astronomy isn't the only science that matters. Anthropology matters too. Studying the stars is just as important as studying humanity. And so it's worth noting that even if you do not believe in Native Hawaiian spirituality, they see Mauna Kea as a sacred mountain where chiefs are buried and legends took place. That is worth something. It's worth something to them, and it's worth something to humanity as a whole, because we should be valuing these cultures. If Mauna Kea were literally the only place in the world where you could build this telescope, then maybe I would agree that it would be worth trying to make a deal. But it's not. This telescope would also fit very nicely in the Canary Islands, for instance, but Mauna Kea is easier for the people who don't actually care about Mauna Kea because we own the land already. Maybe there was a time when thoughtful scientists could have sat down with Native Hawaiians and hammered out a way to build this telescope with minimum environmental and cultural impact. And I'm sure that many of the Native Hawaiians who are scientists would agree with that. Polynesians were studying the stars and using them to navigate their ships 5 millennia ago. Native Hawaiians value education and astronomy just as much as, if not more than, many other cultures. But the time to do that would have been before 50 years of colonization and lying and environmental and cultural destruction. With the TMT, funders are hoping to just skate by without ever proving that they've changed, that times have changed, that their values have changed. If a friend constantly asks to borrow money from you and never ever pays you back, why would you believe them the 14th time that they ask? If they really have changed, they'll show it. They'll make good on their previous promises first, and only then will you know that you can trust their future promises. So if you want to read up more on the TMT and on the protests, check out KAHEA, the Hawaiian Environmental Alliance. Link is in the notes. They need your support, especially now that protesters are being arrested by police and military forces who are cracking down on them. And if anything, at the very least, we can all agree that the military probably shouldn't be involved in a conflict between the government and a group of people wishing to practice their culture and protect their environment.